Darlington Raceway, a track many consider the toughest one on the circuit. For over 70 years, NASCAR's oldest speedway has dared the fearless in the riding as fast and as close to the outermost retaining wall in order to garner the fastest speeds around the track. But did you know that the track was never designed to run as it was now? You probably watched a race at Darlington and wondered why there is all this track below the racing line. Well, that's because this is technically the racetrack. All this surface down here is what you're technically supposed to be racing on. What is actually raced on up on the top of the racetrack was actually designed to be runoff for accidents. That's right, runoff on an oval. In a time before Hans devices and safer barriers, it was believed that the best way to slow down a car from hitting the outside wall was just put a bank up against the outermost groove, so that when you spun towards it, the incline would dissipate your speed as much as possible. Now, Darlington has since reconfigured generously to make it so the transition from coming off the banking isn't as bad as what it was years ago. But the track is still virtually what it was 7 decades ago. It is the only track with this theory of runoff to have survived past its era, which is kind of remarkable because Darlington was by far not the only track to try and do this. Tracks all across the country were doing this outside line banking technique, Darlington being the lesser aggressive, only having 23 to 25 degrees of banking. One track, however, went so far with it that it became perhaps the most bizarre track in the entire country, and maybe in the history of all of racing. Meet Oakland Stadium Speedway. No, not that Oakland Stadium. If they raced there, the place would probably collapse. This Oakland Stadium Speedway. It was built in 1931. It was a 1-mile dirt track. It was a fairly large track for the time, as many speedways would rarely reach a 1-mile distance. The first race ran there was in 1932, when the AAA Champ Car Series, or what many know today as the IndyCar Series, ran a 150-lap race at the track. 15 cars ran, with notable drivers aplenty. Fred Frame, Maury Rose, Wilbur Shaw, Louis Mayer, Ernie Triplett, Bob Carey, and the race winner Bill Cummings. Cummings would actually pass Carey with 3 laps to go, putting on a great show for the fans in Northern California. The track, however, would go on to never host a AAA event again, but it became a staple mark of the Northern California and Western racing scene for years to come. Every year on Labor Day weekend, the Oakland 500 would be run the track, building names and icons of the area. Probably the most notable would be that of Bob Swiker, winner of the 1955 Indianapolis 500. 8 years before that, he was racing in Oakland in a car he built himself, finishing second in his first race ever. Outside of cars and open wheel, motorcycles also sailed around the stadium. All motorcycle races ran at the track during this time were won by riders either piloting Harley Davidsons or Indians. The track also gained a reputation for being incredibly dangerous. The first motorcycle fatality to occur was that of Dick Ince, the son of Thomas Ince, a prominent silent film actor, known widely as the father of the Western. By World War II, stock cars had not yet touched the speedway. The leash ran out during the Second World War, and the track sat barren. By the time it was revived, they completely demolished the old track and rebuilt it in a different way. And from here, the history gets a little bit hazier from what I could find. On this program that was found from 1946, you can see all the events that the track would host. This is where it got the stadium name. It was touted as the most scientifically designed sports stadium in the world. In its early years, the track wasn't really sustainable to run the top groove. It was banked, but since it was dirt, it was kind of hard to stay up there, and it was faster to run the slower, more shorter line around the bottom. However, they returned in 1946 with a paved racetrack, and they banked the outside even more. The track was like Darlington, and that was egg-shaped, but this time was a 5/8 mile. Just like Darlington, one side of the corners was banked differently from the other side. The one side, and possibly the more aggressive side, sat at a staggering, get ready for it, 62 degrees of banking, whilst the other sat at a not so impressive 45. Talladega's 33, by the way. The banking became something of legend for this track. It is said that when open wheel cars would run around the track, that if you stood in the infield, you could actually see the driver's feet in the cockpit. Now, I don't think I need to tell you how dangerous this racing probably is, but this also must have been an absolute spectacle. Watching people go up on that banking and sail around the outside of this track right up against that wall in open wheel cars, stock cars, whatever you could. It was a battle against inertia. You literally couldn't slow down. You had to keep going as fast as you physically could or else you would fall off the banking. And that would either lead to you spinning out or, even worse, flipping. By 1951, the first Cup race was held there, which was won by Marvin Burke. It was a 250-lap race, to which Racing Reference lists the track as being a dirt track. But as you can see from a lot of the photos, this track was paved. There was probably some hints of dirt because this track was also a very dirty track, but it was a paved track. This was Burke's only ever Cup Series start, and he won it. Thus, this makes him the first and only driver to ever win their first and last career race. The Cup Series wouldn't return to the track until 1954, when the new West Series was formed, what many know today as ARCA West. It was also in this year the track was modified to an even shorter length of only a half mile. This was a very poor move for the track as it reduced the ability to maintain it consistently and took away some of the fun of the track. The banking was still there, but now the bottom groove had become dirt. It was rumored that actually, in order for the drivers to race around this place, they rutted the dirt right up against the pavement and would hook their tires in it to try and keep speed during the first race here. It was not good. Mechanical issues were aplenty, as not only was the dirt an issue, but up on the asphalt, people trying to run at those speeds on that banking still was literally tearing up the asphalt. The race was won by Dick Rathman, and he beat Marvin Panch. Hall of Famer Herschel McGriff was on the pole for this race. And for the second race there in 1954, Danny Lettner won over Marvin Panch again, who finished second. This would mark one of the last events the track would actually hold, as in 1955 the last races were ran there. The track was officially closed down as the empty part of the area that it sat in soon got fuller and fuller. By 1958 it was bulldozed and a shopping mall was being built over top of it. Today, it's now the location of the Bay Fair Center shopping mall, completely surrounded by homes. From what I can tell, there is no hint of that track remaining. It is completely gone, and there's no signs of it even existing. The mall doesn't even acknowledge it. But for those who stroll through the aisles of the Oxford Street shoe store, they stand where at one point the start-finish line was. For those in the Habet Sports store, it's where at one point the 62-degree banking sat. And for the men and women who stroll through the aisles of Target, it is where people just like them 70 years ago strolled through to see man, machine, and gravity test themselves to the absolute limit.